Greetings, and welcome back to Pseudo's journey through the Japanese air tech tree in War Thunder, a series of subpar guides made for unskilled free-to-play players by an unskilled free-to-play player. In this incredibly biased and opinionated guide/review, we shall be looking at one of the worst Japanese dive bombers in the already not great lineup of Japanese dive bombers, the D3A1. The D3A1 can be found at BR 1.3 in rank 1 in the 4th line of the Japanese air tech tree. Well, if the B5N2 just before this plane in the tech tree shook your faith that Japanese CAS is pretty awful, the D3A1 shall restore that faith. Despite the overall quite good performance of this plane in the real world due to several circumstances, mainly the unpreparedness of the US early on in their involvement in the war, in War Thunder it is outshone by nearly every similarly ranked CAS plane in the tech tree. Starting out with the good things about the performance of the D3A1, it has a decent turn rate. The turn rate can't compete with many other dedicated biplane turn fighters, and even struggles against some dedicated monoplane turn fighters. As a dedicated dive bomber, the D3A1 does also get an air spawn in air battles, which is always a nice advantage as you will start out with a massive energy advantage. Now that we've looked at the few good things about the flight performance, let's look at the bad, of which there is a lot more. The roll rate of the D3A1 is rather atrocious, and the rudder underperforms a bit in a straight line. This makes getting guns on target with this plane rather difficult even in the best of situations. I've noticed that the plane has a hard time turning in the horizontal plane, and has a tendency to turn straight towards the ground, which it yearns to return to. Be careful of that when flying this plane low to the ground. The D3A1 also has a very weak engine, and is frequently outran by most other monoplanes at this rank by a large margin. Not only that, it has poor acceleration, meaning that it takes quite a lot of time to reach your already poor top speed. Not only that, but it bleeds energy very quickly, energy which takes a long time to regain. The controls will also lock up a good bit in a dive, though not as badly as many designated fighters. The WEP also tends to quickly overheat the engine on anything but the coldest of maps. The durability of the D3A1 is not great either. It has a fairly weak airframe that can be quickly taken out by many of the low-powered guns at this BR. Not only that, but as with most Japanese planes, it lights on fire like a balloon filled with helium very easily, and the end results are almost as explosively catastrophic. This plane does have a self-sealing fuel tank, something rare in the Japanese air tech tree, but it really only helps so much. The EFS module also can help substantially with this minor inconvenience. The wings don't rip until about 600 km per hour, so you can actually take this thing into some very long and protracted dives. The mechanization of the plane is fairly simple, but very important for the playstyle. As a naval aircraft of this time period, the D3A1 has fixed landing gear that can take quite the beating. The wings will rip long before the landing gear in a dive, so no need to worry there. Unless your wings rip, then you do need to worry. This plane actually does get an air brake, which is very useful for taking the plane into steep dives above the enemy. The combat flaps can also be activated up to about 450 km per hour, allowing you to use them for a little while in both dogfights and early on in dives, though they do drain your already pitiful energy that much more. The forward armaments are two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns. These are the same incredibly lackluster guns that you got on the F1M2. They are effectively useless and need a massive amount of time on target to take anything out of the sky. Even on open-top tanks, you'll need a great deal of luck to actually take anything out. However, the D3A1 does get a massive 1,800 rounds to compensate for such pitiful weaponry. As a dive bomber, the D3A1 gets a 7.7mm Type 92 dorsal machine gun. This is also mostly useless. It will take you much longer to shoot anything down with your dorsal gunner than it will take them to shoot you down. However, I will admit that actually has a good deal more usability than the one on the B5N2, mainly due to the fact that it has a much less obscured area of fire, being able to fire almost directly behind the plane. The main draw of the D3A1 should be its secondary weapon load, emphasis on should. This plane only has a single bomb load it can carry, with two 60kg Navy Type 97 No. 6 bombs under the wings, and one 250kg Navy Type No. 25 Model 2 bomb under the fuselage. The 60kg bombs drop first and will require a near-direct hit to kill anything but open-top vehicles. The 250kg bomb is much more forgiving, being able to take out most tanks at this tier without much trouble, even on a little bit worse of a drop. I will give some caveats to this though. Firstly, the D3A1 doesn't have an optical bomb sight, so you will be using just your intuition to drop. This means that you will likely miss the 60kg bombs unless you spend an insane amount of time practicing. Secondly, the 250kg bomb takes a while to drop after the input is given, due to it being in a bomb cradle. This means that you will have to learn the timing it takes from input to actual release and plan ahead. Thirdly, I've had frequent trouble with the 250kg bomb destroying my propeller on the way down. You will have to be very cautious of the angle of your plane when dropping bombs due to this fact to guarantee that it will clear your propeller. I will also note that there is a much faster, more maneuverable dive bomber in the Japanese air tech tree, which shall not be named, at the exact same BR, which has much better secondary armaments and none of the problems listed above. I'm not saying that this other plane, which shall not be named, is vastly superior. All I'm saying is that I would find no reason to fly this plane out over ground battles instead of the B5N2. The playstyle of the D3A1 is built around its role as a dive bomber. While you can outrun some fighters at this rank, due to its high energy bleed, low engine power, and pathetic forward weaponry, I would stick to using that as a dive bomber exclusively. I will also note that the bomb load it carries is not sufficient to take out a single base in air battles. In my opinion, this is a plane that only has a viable use case as CAS, the viability of which is also quite up to debate. In getting B-roll for this video, I spent a good amount of time flying this thing out in air battles. In all that time, I only managed to get 1 or 2 kills. It was not optimal. When flying the D3A1 out as CAS, you should think of it as a more maneuverable Ju-87 with worse forward armaments and less awesome Stuka siren for the psychological warfare. As stated earlier, the D3A1 yearns for the ground, so in ground battles, let that guide you. My recommendation is this: find a stationary target and pull up to bleed speed and position yourself right above them. Once you've drained some speed and are a little bit off vertical above them, let your plane nose down as it so desperately desires and throw out your air brake and combat flaps. This is where the D3A1 shines, as in this precise situation, you will have incredibly good control of the plane and can line up the perfect bomb drop. Remembering what was said earlier about the input delay from press to drop of the 250kg bomb and its tendency to take out your propeller, line up your bombs and drop. After that, pull up before you hit the ground. If it just so happens that you took out your propeller with a bomb drop or were in a dive for a little long and let your combat flaps rip, feel free to allow your plane to return to the ground as it so desires, at long last, right into the enemy tank for added psychological warfare. Stukas get their siren to terrorize the enemies, you get your plane. The D3A1 has to look out for a lot of enemies. Most of the more advanced planes, such as the P400 and early BF109s, will be a major issue for it, and you'll be nearly helpless against them. One of the planes I had the most trouble with was the S2BU and other similar fighter bombers that get an air spawn, as the air spawn allows them to outclimb and outgun you with no issues. I would actually just recommend avoiding most other planes unless they're blind as a bat and you have a massive energy advantage on them. Avoid dogfighting most biplanes as they'll easily outturn you, but if you are going to fight anything, bombers and other dive bombers are probably your best bet, though you'll have a hard time actually doing much damage to them. Landing and taking off are pretty easy overall as you have great takeoff and landing flaps. The landing gear are fixed so the landing doesn't have to be very smooth. The brakes on the other hand are a bit weak, so I'd recommend a bit of a slower landing. I found that the D3A1 never seemed to nose over, even when I slammed on the brakes and did nothing else to keep it from doing so. Takeoff is equally easy. This plane was a naval carrier fighter, so it has no problems taking off quickly with takeoff flaps out. The visuals of the D3A1 are overall not the worst, but they're also not the best. The D3A1 is one of the few planes in the tech tree to get the white and red paint job, but the overall look is a little different. It has very leaf-like wings, and the overall shape of the D3A1 just looks a little bit less sleek than many of the other Japanese planes. Not bad, but not the best in my opinion. The cockpit actually has fairly good visibility, all things considered. Remember, I really never play first person, so this is all a subjective view from somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. I found that there really wasn't much bracing at all, and that the wings are small enough that the sideways visibility was quite decent. I would enjoy this cockpit in the event that I actually ever want to play this plane again. The cost of the D3A1 is fairly reasonable for this tier. It costs 4,000 RP and 2,100 SL to research and purchase the plane. The cruise slot cost is 600 SL, bringing us up to a total cost of 2,700 SL to purchase and slot the plane. Do I think that this is a little bit too high of a price for what the plane is? Without a doubt, as it's about as much as the A5M4, a plane that is vastly better in my personal opinion. However, I suppose it is fair for a plane of this rank. The modifications do help slightly, but they sadly aren't enough to make the plane perform very well. The good news is that you don't have to research the bombs, as they are fully researched right off the bat. So, I would focus on turn performance first. Even fully spaded, you won't be outrunning anything, so you might as well work to outmaneuver them. Get the fuselage and airframe modifications first. If you've been bursting into flames spontaneously when a fired round looks at you funny, get the EFS module. Otherwise, get the engine and wing repair modules, then the engine injections and cover. Go back and get the other performance modifications, then get the improved guns and turret if you so desire at last. The total cost of all the modifications is 4,450 RP and 2,690 SL. This is a little bit of a high cost at this point in the game, but it does make the plane a little bit more playable. That's all I have for you on this quite mediocre plane. If you can't tell, the D3A1 was not the most fun plane I've flown in War Thunder. However, I could see how it theoretically could be usable in the hands of a much better pilot than myself. Seriously though, just use the B5N, it's so much better for CAS at this BR. I'd be honored to see you next week, where we'll be covering the first bomber that starts off the flying circus that is the Japanese bomber line, the Ki 32. Whether you're there or not, I thank you for tuning in today.